You're zipped into a tent in grizzly country, the fire outside gone from flames to a dull orange breathing thing, and something big is moving through the brush past the tree line. You hear it, you don't see it, and here's the part that should terrify you if you actually thought about it for a second. You're about to fall asleep anyway. Unconscious, unarmed, completely at the mercy of an animal that can run 35 miles an hour and open a car door for fun. And yet, statistically, you wake up fine. Not luck. Something else is happening out there in the dark. And the last piece of it, what happens to the whole forest once a bear decides you're not worth the trouble, is the part that actually changes how you think about camping. For good, let's get into it. Start with a fact that sounds made up. It isn't. Bears used to be everywhere in North America. Then, very deliberately, they mostly weren't. Grizzly numbers in the lower 48 dropped from an estimated 50,000 before European settlement to roughly 700 to 800 by the mid-1970s, squeezed into a handful of protected pockets like Yellowstone and Glacier. That's not decline. That's a species getting hammered, traps, rifles, poison, for over a century, the same way your group chat gets hammered every time someone suggests a 6 a.m. hike. And bears learn fast when the lesson is fatal. The bold ones got shot. The cautious ones survived, bred, and passed the caution down. Ecologists have a name for this. The landscape of fear, a term popularized by biologist Aldo Leopold. The idea that predators build an invisible mental map of where danger lives, whether or not danger is actually there right now. You're not a person in a tent to a grizzly. You're a coordinate, marked to void, long before the tent ever showed up. It's not just grizzlies either. Black bears, which never face the same scale of organized extermination, still show measurably more caution around humans in regions with a longer hunting history than in regions with less contact. The map isn't fixed. It gets redrawn generation by generation, based entirely on what the last few generations learned about us, which means, in a strange way, every bear that avoids your tent tonight is running on inherited information passed down by bears that never met you and never will. You're famous. You just don't know it. The bear doesn't just remember you, though. It smells you first. A black bear's nose is estimated at roughly 7 times the power of a bloodhound's. Grizzlies aren't far behind. Researchers have tracked them catching carcass scent over a mile out, wind depending. That's an absurd flood of chemical data hitting an animal's brain the moment it drifts downwind of your camp. And none of it reads clean. It's you plus off-gassing tent fabric plus sunscreen plus the granola wrapper you swore you packed out. Somewhere under all of that, there's an actual primate smell, but it's buried so deep under synthetic noise that it barely registers. Bears mark territory on what researchers call bear trees. Trunks clawed, rubbed, and sometimes bitten to leave a scent and visual record other bears will read for months. It's a whole postal system running through the forest that you will never be invited to use. Your campsite doesn't fit into any of it. Not prey, not rival, not food in any shape the bear recognizes. Just static. And animals that have survived this long don't investigate static. They route around it the same way you skip past a spam call from a number you don't recognize. There's one big exception to all of this, and it's worth saying out loud instead of glossing over it. A mother grizzly with cubs runs on a completely different calculation than every other bear described so far. Her risk tolerance for you drops to almost nothing because a cub lost to a bad decision isn't a cost she can absorb and simply try again next season. Wildlife biologists consistently rank sudden, close-range encounters with a sow and cubs as the single most dangerous bear situation in North America. Not because she's lost her caution, but because she's running an entirely different equation, one where standing her ground costs less than the alternative. Everything else in this video is about a bear deciding you're not worth the risk. This is the one scenario where a bear decides you might be exactly the risk she can't afford to ignore. Here's the myth Hollywood's been selling for decades. Time to kill it. Bears are not reckless. Grizzly biologist Stephen Herrero spent decades cataloging documented attacks across North America for his research, later published as Bear Attacks, Their Causes and Avoidance, and the overwhelming majority weren't predatory at all. They were defensive. A startled mother, a bear cornered at close range with no room to retreat, a carcass the bear had already claimed and wasn't willing to negotiate over. Deliberate predatory attacks on healthy, sleeping humans specifically are genuinely rare enough that individual cases still make international news decades later, which tracks because the math is brutal. A 600-pound grizzly can still lose a fight badly enough to die slowly from infection 3 weeks later because there's no urgent care out here, no painkillers, no stitches, just a long, quiet decline that ends the same way no matter who technically won. Every encounter, then, is a live risk calculation running constantly, silently, in the background, kind of like your brain doing math on whether it's worth replying to a work email at 11 p.m. And a sleeping human, wrapped in synthetic fabric, making unfamiliar noises, surrounded by gear no prey animal has ever used in the history of the planet, does not win that calculation. Not when there's a berry patch 2 ridges over that doesn't talk back and definitely doesn't zip. There's also a timing trick almost nobody accounts for. In 2018, ecologist Caitlin Gaynor and her team published research in the journal Science, analyzing 62 studies across 6 continents. Here's the finding in one sentence, so you can actually repeat it later. Mammals living near humans shift 36% more of their activity into nighttime hours than mammals in undisturbed areas. Say that one out loud at dinner and watch faces change, because it flips the entire assumption people walk into a tent with. It's not that the night belongs to the bear. In heavily used areas, bears have been documented actively shrinking their overlap with peak human hours, not expanding it. The exact stretch of time you're asleep is often one of the lower risk windows of the whole 24 hours, because the bear already rerouted its schedule around you, the same way you'd quietly avoid the one aisle at the grocery store where you ran into your ex. There's also a trick you're probably already doing without knowing why it works. Hikers in bear country are told constantly to make noise on the trail, talk loudly, clap, attach a bell to your pack, call out "Hey bear" around blind corners. It sounds almost superstitious, like knocking on wood. It isn't. Wildlife agencies recommend it because a startled bear at close range, one that had no warning a human was approaching, is far more likely to react offensively than a bear that heard you coming from 200 yards out and quietly chose to leave. You're not scaring the bear off with the noise itself. You're giving its ancient caution enough runway to kick in before proximity forces a different kind of decision. Every "Hey bear" you've ever shouted into an empty trail wasn't really about the bear that showed up. It was about the one that didn't, because it already knew. You're rarely actually alone out there either. Backcountry camps come with noise built in: zippers, gear shifting, someone rolling over at 3 a.m., someone else's dad snoring like a chainsaw with a head cold. To a bear, none of that reads as an easy, isolated target. It reads as a cluster, and clusters are unpredictable in a way predators genuinely hate. A bear that spent its whole life reading which prey animal fell behind the herd doesn't have a clean read on a tent full of noise-making strangers who might all sit bolt upright at once. Big predators chase isolation, not commotion, which is part of why solo backcountry travel carries measurably higher risk in bear country than group travel does. A solo hiker asleep in a bivy sack and a group of 6 around a dying fire don't register as the same category of risk at all, even though from 30 yards out, in the dark, they might look almost identical. But let's not pretend this is a universal law, because it isn't, and the exceptions follow a brutally consistent pattern. August 13th, 1967. 2 grizzlies, 2 women, 2 separate campsites in Glacier National Park. Same night. It became known as the Night of the Grizzlies, and it's still the deadliest single night in the park's history. Investigators later found both bears had a documented history of feeding on improperly stored garbage near park lodges. Years of easy access to human food had done something very specific. It eroded the inherited wariness and replaced it with a new, much more dangerous association. Humans mean calories, not danger. That's the pattern behind nearly every well-documented predatory bear attack on record. Not a wild, healthy animal running on ordinary instinct. A bear whose signals got scrambled, usually by us, and usually slowly, one unsecured cooler at a time. Once that association forms, it doesn't quietly reverse itself. Wildlife agencies across North America still relocate, and in the worst cases euthanize, bears that have crossed that line, because a habituated bear almost never goes back to being a cautious one. The Night of the Grizzlies is credited with a major shift in national park policy afterward. Garbage dumps that had operated near park lodges for decades, effectively training generations of bears to associate people with food, were shut down within a few years. The bears didn't change. The humans did, and the caution mostly came back. Now here's the part that goes past your tent entirely, and it's the one that should genuinely stick with you. That fear doesn't stay contained to bears. Research echoing the well-known Yellowstone wolf studies from ecologist William Ripple shows a similar ripple effect elsewhere. When a major predator changes where and when it moves because of a perceived threat, prey behavior shifts downstream from it, grazing patterns shift, plant regrowth shifts, and the smaller animals living underneath all of that shift again. Bears themselves are also one of North America's most important seed dispersers, spreading berry seeds for miles through their droppings as they roam their territory. So when fear of you shrinks or reroutes where a bear is willing to go, it isn't just protecting your tent for one night. It's quietly redrawing which parts of an entire forest get seeded, which get grazed, and which get left alone completely. Researchers studying this kind of fear-driven cascade have started calling it an ecology of fear effect, distinct from the older idea that predators only shape ecosystems through direct killing. The shaping happens even when nothing dies. It happens in the empty space around where a predator chooses not to go, which is a strange thing to sit with. An entire landscape quietly rearranged by an animal's memory of you, without a single interaction ever taking place. One species deciding you're not worth the risk, and the whole map moves underneath it. So the next time something big is moving past the firelight, and every cell in your body is screaming that you should be prey right now, you're not wrong to feel it. That instinct is old. It's earned. It kept your ancestors alive for a very long time, long before tents, long before bear bells, long before any of this was a video you'd watch on your phone in bed. But out past the glow, something with a far better nose than yours, running on 10,000 generations of getting this exact decision right, already ran the numbers on you. Hours ago, it knew better.